For those of you that love talking about animals, from Sci News, oldest reptile embryos discovered. An international team of paleontologists has unearthed the oldest known fossil reptile embryos dating back about 280 million years. And now, from prehistoric to present, my name is Ethan. Welcome to Creature Guide Live Prehistoric News. Let's dive right back into the prehistoric news of the day. So this is a bit of an older article, but I have not heard of this incident. So let's see what's going on here. This seems to be some older species of guessing maybe a crocodilomorph, um, some sort of metriorhynchid. An artist's reconstruction of the mesosaur egg. Okay, this is not a member of the crocodilomorph family. It's not even an archosaur, which is the group of reptiles in which animals like the pterosaurs and the dinosaurs evolved from. This is a much older branch of marine reptile. The study published in the journal Historical Biology reports well preserved amniotic embryos of Mesosaur, the ancient aquatic reptile from the early Permian of Uruguay and Brazil. So, this would be, and when it comes to the Mesosaur lineage, somewhere around 300 to 275 million years ago. So mesosaurs, they are a group of marine reptiles that used to be theorized as filter feeders, but deeper analysis on their skull structure has revealed that these animals did most likely hunt smaller species of fish, so they wouldn't have to rely on much smaller organisms for food. Mesosaurus itself was one of the smaller species of the group. It reached about 3 feet in length, or somewhere around a meter, and barely weighed 3 to 4 pounds. It was a very small animal. So let's see. This discovery suggests that mesosaurs were either viviparous, pushing back this mode of reproduction by 60 million years, or that they laid eggs in advanced stages of development. Although the oldest known adult amniote fossils date back some 315 million years, very few collections of fossil eggs and embryos are available to paleontologists. Wow. So this is quite interesting with how far this type of reproduction occurs. In Brazil, the team unearthed a fossil specimen in gestation, which revealed that mesosaur embryos were retained in the uterus during most of their development. These reptiles, therefore, were probably viviparous. The team also unearthed 26 adult mesosaur specimens in Uruguay. Wow, that's really good to hear. All of which were associated with embryos or very young individuals, dating from the same period as the Brazilian fossil. But why though? 26 in one area, almost as if some major cover up happened, like when it comes to sediment, and it just buried the young mesosaurs, which is quite unfortunate, but it's good for us. So, that's kind of deranged. Anyway, this is interesting. So they're depicting an ammonite with the mesosaurs, which makes sense considering ammonites first evolved somewhere around 365 million years ago towards the um, during the Devonian period. And they're rarely mentioned during the Devonian, the Carboniferous, Permian, even the Triassic period. You probably have to reach somewhere around 165 to 170 million years ago during the mid Jurassic period until they're um, mentioned much more frequently. So um, I doubt that mesosaurs were hunting ammonites. They were probably just simply, when it comes to their shell, it was a big risk for their jaw. Now, granted, it's basically a squid inside of the shell, so it would have been quite soft. But there is evidence for the ammonites having an exterior leather covering. So most likely, if anything, the mesosaurs might play with it. It's been shown with like ichthyosaurs, but they wouldn't evolve until the Triassic. And yes, just so here's simply a reconstruction of a mesosaur being semi-aquatic, like today's alligators, crocodiles. I do wonder though, because crocodiles, alligators, there comes to a point where if they don't have access to land, they can die from stress. So I wonder if it might occur with the mesosaurs as well. Do they have a somewhat like saltwater crocodile lifestyle? That's a big question. Let's take a look at this fossil. Wow. Hey, you can even see the skull right here. That's pretty incredible. All the distinct vertebrae. Sheesh. Mesosaur embryo inside an egg from the early Permian Mangrula Formation in Uruguay. This is one individual. Sheesh, that's very well preserved. Although these more or less disarticulated specimens are difficult to interpret, most of them are probably embryos in the uterus, thus backing up the hypothesis that mesosaurs were viviparous. The largest of these fossils may be young animals that were looked after by at least one of the parents, pointing to the existence of parental care. However, one isolated mesosaur egg was also found at the Uruguayan site. Well, this is also fascinating to hear considering not all reptiles do this, but at least crocodiles, alligators will take care of their young for at least 2 years. So the question is not just with mesosaurs, but even later species of reptile, and even certain earlier species, how long might they take care of their young for? Which is, would it be a similar time? But also the question is, how long would something like a mesosaur live for? Now, other animals that existed during this time are members of the synapsid family. So these are basically the proto mammals that would eventually lead into true mammals. And technically, modern mammals today are members of the synapsid lineage, which first evolved in the Permian period around 300 million years ago. They did experience a massive die off, though, during the Permian mass extinction around 251 million years ago. But this over here is Ophiocodon. And Ophiocodon could reach somewhere around 10 feet in length, or around 3 meters, and probably it's somewhere between 4 to 500 pounds. It's in some ways was a bit more heavily built than Dimetrodon, which it is related to, but it's far off in the synapsid lineage. In fact, it belongs to the Ophiocondontidae lineage of synapsids. This animal was probably feeding on different species of amphibians in the region, where it inhabited different parts of North America and Europe. This would have taken place somewhere around 285 million years ago. So you would have seen these in a wide variety of different types of swamps, marshes, and no, unlike the Dimetrodon, they did not have sails or extended vertebrae on their back. So, despite it looking like an amphibian, though, it's actually more close related to mammals. So, here, though, is a close relative of the Dimetrodon. So, this is Secodontosaurus, which is also a member of the Secodontosaur lineage of um, proto mammals. So, despite this animal looking quite reptilian like, you could even say dinosaur in some cases, it has a much more thin and narrow snout compared to Dimetrodon, which almost gives it like a Spinosaurus sort of a look, or one of the older reconstructions of Spinosaurus. It is a very distant relative. Um, it is a bit of a question as to why animals like Secodontosaurus and the Spinosaurus, it's actually not just Spinosaurus, different groups of carnivorous theropod dinosaurs, as well as certain medium-sized herbivorous ornithopod dinosaurs, had sails on their backs. But especially when it comes to the proto mammals, it's still a bit of a debate as to whether or not they would have used them to heat or cool themselves, or would they have just simply have been used for display during the mating season. I agree with the second theory. I just, if they're proto mammals, I would expect them to be warm blooded. I just don't see why they would need that for um, heating themselves, or I'm not exactly sure how it would help cool themselves. Now, you could say maybe, blood vessels just releasing heat, but I think so far there isn't any evidence for blood vessels occurring within those cells. Oh, okay. So when it comes to the size of this animal, Secodontosaurus was somewhere around 11 to 12 feet in length and probably weighed somewhere between 5 to 600 pounds. But it was a bit much more lightly built than Dimetrodon. Dimetrodon preyed on pretty much anything in the region that it inhabited. Secodontosaurus did coexist with Dimetrodon, even as well as being related. It isn't it's not its closest relative though. Technically, it's very far off in the family of Secodontosaurs that it and Dimetrodon belong to. But looking at it, it has a very thin, narrow jaw, so it probably was mainly a piscivore or a fish eater. So let's see. This find casts doubt on the hypothesis of viviparity, which in theory excludes the laying of eggs. It suggests that the Uruguay mesosaurs laid eggs at an advanced stage of development, which then hatched shortly afterwards, several minutes to days later. Yeah, so here's full grown mesosaur. Yeah, there's the baby. Wow, they have very distinct teeth. Like you don't really find this on any other species of reptile. However, there are certain species of flying pterosaur from the early Cretaceous. I believe one is named Pterodastro that has somewhat similar type of tooth structure to it. Now, that animal, it does look like it could be a filter feeder. The study therefore reveals the oldest known fossil amniote embryos from the Paleozoic. So, yep, and as it says, ranges from about 543 to 250 million years ago, and the first examples of embryo retention and perhaps viviparity, pushing back this reproductive mechanism some 60 million years. I think they mentioned that earlier. Oh, it's really good to hear. So let me know in the comments what your favorite species of prehistoric reptile is. And from prehistoric to present, my name is Ethan. This is Creature Guide Live Daily News. Remember to like, comment, subscribe if you love talking about animals, and share this show with everyone you know, because nothing is better than all animals all the time.